Hey Ricky, thanks for joining. I'm here with Mike, Rachel, and Krista. And
Hey
yeah,
everyone.
hey, good to hear you. So I'm thinking today I'll just do the first topic. We'll see how much juice it has if we want to go further. But what I've been thinking about, I've been teaching the centers class with Mike, and we did the throat center today. And Mike brought up the distinction of doing and being, which was an original distinction that Ra used before he had the term manifest or any of these types. So, what it is to be a doer, I guess the manifester being the only true doer, versus being a beer. And I started thinking about units of work and how work works. So, what's the difference between response, like I'm playing tennis and someone hits the ball at me and I respond and hit it back, versus what is it to initiate. And there are some really obvious cases and some less obvious ones. So here's an obvious case. I met a manifester who had invented four things in her life, and they all had to do with supply chain manufacturing. But each of these four things made her millions of dollars. They were inventions that changed the world of manufacturing forever, and she was extremely exhausted at the idea of having to run any of these businesses. Whereas the generators I've seen who have really run businesses and so on. So there seems to be such a big difference between the vision and the creation of something new versus the building and the kind of day-to-day running of it. But then I have to wonder, because there are some interesting cases. For instance, building a business requires both that hierarchical vision, but it also requires day-to-day work. So is this where the manifester traditionally has a division of labor with the generator? They hire the generator to answer the phones. They hire the generator to go there in the morning and turn the lights on. They hire the generators to keep the place clean, right? So they can do the manifester things, which are thinking about what's never been done before to have some sort of impact and bring something new into the world. Okay, well, that's part of it. But then say you're someone like David Lynch. He obviously created an incredible piece of work in Twin Peaks, never been done before. His whole film oeuvre is incredible. He's a 360 generator. Or think about Carl Jung, who had a tremendous impact on the world, radically changing the world through bringing something entirely new, an entirely new system that has never before been developed. So then I started thinking everything in the chart needs manifestation. It's just that the beers are essentially getting everything ready for the spark to catalyze it. That the problem the beer has is that they are too caught up in the doing, trying to get the spark, that they're not actually preparing for the spark, right? Because ultimately everything in the body graph is seeking manifestation. It's not like manifestor's purpose is to make their mark on the world. Everyone else's purpose is to do nothing. You know, don't build anything, don't write any books, don't create any companies, don't make any impact on the world because you're not a manifestor. No, it's not like that. Everything in the whole body graph is seeking the throat. Everything is trying to get there. The manifester has a design that can see the pieces and can see where the critical point of what needs to begin to set the dominoes in motion. Where the generator just has all these dominoes, they don't really know how to set it in motion. They're so focused on it. They're like, I'm going to do this 3-week makeover. I'm going to do this. They're so focused on the idea that somehow they can make it happen. But I guess what I'm trying to say is everyone, projectors and reflectors, they're all doing work that is seeking manifestation in some way. That manifestation is not some yang thing. As we were looking at earlier, all of the throat gates are in the double yin quarter. They all have double yin as their foundation, which maybe says something about the throat being the closest gland to the exterior and what is the final threshold through which everything must pass to be externalized into the world. That's a double yin process. That's a form principle process. So we can get confused when we think of the manifester as maybe the manifester themselves are double yang, but in some sense, if we associate the diagrams, like the yin of the generator who's receptive to life, the yang of the manifester who starts something and pushes with their, aura that's made to push things out of the way, to make room. I was thinking about that earlier, how anytime you get something new into the world, you basically have to make room for it in the world. Everything else has to shoulder over as something new shoulders its way in. A new business opens, the other businesses change their prices because now they're getting undercut because they're getting shouldered in, they're getting muscled in on by the new business. Mm-hmm. So the manifester is designed to muscle in with their repelling aura, with their yang unyielding, and yet the process of manifestation, which is not exclusive to the manifester, that is the process of giving rise to things in the world, everyone has a part to play in that. It's just the way they do it is so different. The generator is doing something iterative where they are kind of getting conned if they think that there's an ends justify a means thing. Mm-hmm. Same for the projector. If they think the recognition is coming later and they're doing it to try to get this carrot on the stick that in the eternally receding horizon doesn't work. The manifester, it does work that way. I mean, it's very similar to the ego. It's very much the end does justify the means. If we do this once, we never have to do it again. We've permanently done it. Nobody can take that away from us. Like, we've permanently been the first people to do this. So the manifester has a very different approach.
Hey, welcome.
Hey. Hello. Hello. So, yeah, we're just getting started on our topic for today, which is the manifester and the generator.
Okay.
Yeah, what's your name?
I'm Tyler.
Jonah.
Hey.
What's up? Yeah. Mike, everyone.
Hey, Mike. Good to see you.
So yeah, we're
Rachel and Elizabeth. Krista, sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a couple of people remotely as well. We have Ricky, Nicola, and Sirac. And if anyone wants to chime in remotely where we're at thus far in the conversation, it's kind of, talking with Krista. Krista is a manifester, so she is very much here to do things that have an impact and kind of know how to have an impact, know what little thing you can do that will actually have a big impact. And it's very much about just being able to clearly see what is blocking people. Like we've been talking a lot about, you can see when someone is kind of a generator or manifesting generator where they really are the one who has to build it. They're the one who has to put up the drywall. They're the one who has to fix the leaks and so on. And what can you do to put a little fire under them to get them to do that?
Well, I think I actually had that experience today, literally today.
Yeah.
I watched somebody kind of having a mini meltdown because it felt very overwhelming to her what the situation she was in. And looking at her chart I saw today, she's a generator, 4-6 generator. But we actually kind of had the discussion of being a manifestor versus a generator because she had read about human design and knew particular things and was convinced she was a manifester. Just because I like to initiate things, I like to do this, I like to do that. And I go, a lot of people think they want the manifester energy, but it's actually kind of confusing. You think you can just, I'm gonna start this big project or I'm just gonna do that. And it's not like that at all. It's little things. It's like, all right, we're about to start something that's a little uncomfortable. And we're just gonna go in and we're gonna start doing it. Even today while I was helping her out, she was like, it's like you were an angel. She goes, nobody would do this. And that's kind of like the idea of a manifestor to me. She's like, nobody would just jump in and volunteer to help and do a bunch of stuff for no reason. Well, there is kind of a reason. Number one, it's going to make a situation for her livable. Number two, it's going to also essentially help somebody else who, in helping that person, is going to help somebody else. It's a domino butterfly effect. And people think it's big things. No, it's just little things. It's little. I believe this little effect of helping this one thing. She's like, nobody would nobody would do this. She goes, she goes, I should get paid for it. Like everybody thinks, you know, like it should come down to money, reciprocation, this, and this. And for me, there's a bigger end goal of it'll make the situation better for everybody. And it has nothing to do with money. It just had to do with time and effort and willingness to put myself in an uncomfortable position and actually kind of even do something I didn't want to do. But the end precedes the means. You know what I mean? The end goal is bigger than all of it. So and that's how I think about just about every little aspect and everything I do. There's a bigger picture, and it's hard to explain. And you know, I do like to explain it now that I'm into human design more. The informing, because before it used to be very misunderstood. Why are you doing this? Well, I'd like to explain to you why I'm doing it, but it's really hard because it's because I think if I do this, then this will happen, and if this happens, then that will happen. And that's where I feel like big pictures and big goals and the big things happen.
Yeah,
it starts small.
I think the signature of peace is almost, it's the only signature that is the end signature. Like, why are you doing this? For peace. Well, peace is the ultimate end result. But projectors get stuck thinking, okay, I'm going to get a reward for doing this. I'm going to get the recognition for doing it. Then they get the bitterness because they're living for some end result. Generators get stuck. Well, it's only 2 more years. If I just buckle down and do it, I'm going to get through. And then they end up getting sick right when they retire or something, right? There's this classic generator thing where they get a big problem, like right when the final time of change comes. So I really do see the manifester, even down to the signature, as very different in its approach, where there is a sort of what can I do now to change the conditions of possibility of the future? Like that's impossible. Okay, what do I do to make it possible? Other than, right, so this manifestor kind of changing, I guess that was my kind of first question is, if a generator is playing tennis and the person hits the tennis ball and the generator hits the tennis ball back, that's a response. Okay, what else is response? If a generator sees some work that needs to be done and just starts doing the work. They're like, oh, this is disorganized, let me organize this. Or, oh, I need to, like, you know, these kind of fundamental things where you're just responding to what's around you. There's a certain horizon of possibility and you're just working within that. So, but then you start to think, okay, how about making a business? Well, what I found from being in Techstars is that the vast majority of people, pretty much everybody going into business, had their imagination of pretend manifestor world. And the first thing they tell you in Techstars is that you're here in spite of your ideas, that your ideas are your worst enemy because you think you have a special idea, you think you have a special vision for the future of what could be, and you're going for that special vision and you're not actually doing the work, which is the iterative process of one iteration after the next after the next. And it's really not how manifestors work. When I've talked to, you know, manifestors like this inventor I mentioned, she just invented things. She saw clearly that there was a big gap in this field, that there was something that was not working. She did iterate while she was trying to find a solution. Once she found the solution was done. It was very much this waterfall style of the solution's done, now we need the team to build it, then we need the distribution, we need the shipping, whatever, and she just kind of stays on top of the hierarchy and everybody works for her. And it gets out there. It's not the way that startups happen now. Startups have moved much toward probably a generator projector model, where it's all about learning the system, mastering the system, and then putting in the actual work of iterating again and again and again. And you don't really stop iterating. It's not like there is an end. So it's like the peace is because there's an ending. The peace is because you get to end it. That's how you get the peace. The peace is because you get separation or you get something, you're not forced. I mean, I love when, Alocanand Diaz talks about peace, and he talks about how the manifestor is here to separate. And he's like, if I stay, then I will be angry because I'm forced to put up with you more. I'm forced to stay longer. I'm forced to be here when I want to leave. I leave so I can take my peace. And so there is this sort of end of like, okay, this is the project. The project has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And once it's over, we can get to the peace of that. I mean, it makes sense that the manifestor is on the experiential side, on the hot side, that they're not. I mean, of course, there are splenic manifestors, but there's no manifestor channel other than, I guess, the 3420 on the splenic side, which is the MG channel. So the other three manifestor channels are hot. They're from the ego, solar plexus.
Yeah, and it makes sense that the manifestor heyday was, and all the centuries before the 1800s or whatever, when there's still so much to find, so much to explore, so much to invent. It's like you go out there and you do find something truly new. You do make a big shift. You're the first person to this island, or you're the first person to find this mineral, or you're the first person, whatever. There's like more impacts to be
There's
had.
a manifestor heyday because there were more firsts to be
exactly,
had.
Exactly.
And we're going to the projector heyday, which has to do with the mastering of systems, because we have more systems we've inherited that could be, we have more resources that we could use in different ways.
Right. Stuff
So
is
the
already
novelty,
here. Let's move it around.
we're not getting novel resources, we're having novel uses of existing resources.
Right.
And that requires the projector to bring their awareness to the system and to understand it more, rather than to just start a new thing. But at the same time, I guess the other thing I want to keep in mind is that even though we're talking about the manifestor and what they do is bring things into creation, all of the types bring things into creation. And so how do they bring things into creation in different ways, or play different roles within that? I mean, I know reflectors who bring a lot of things into creation. My mom's a painter. Every time she's painting, she's creating something new. And she is doing new styles and new art and so on. So I think it really just becomes a question of what is each type's relationship to the throat center. The manifestor has a motorized throat and no sacral. And what that does is it gives them the energy to consistently basically change things. Whereas change takes a lot of adjustment. There's a lot of energy that's used in changing things. And when the other types are continually changing things, they're going to get really sick because they just don't have a motorized throat, or they do, but they have a sacral and then it can't really keep up and it's not really engaged in the case of the manifesting generator. Or it's not a motorized throat, so it can communicate all day long when it's recognized and invited. But the more it's taking action, the more it's getting sick. And I've thought a lot about that. I'm on the cross of healing. I'm a generator with an undefined throat. So how is my health related to how much action I'm taking versus how much response? And this, again, goes back to that question of where do you draw the line from response to action? Because obviously when I'm responding to something, what I'm responding to is work that needs to be done. Action is not necessarily work. Action is like, I don't know, you can do a lot of things to take an action. Change your name, take an action. Doesn't use a lot of energy. You just took an action. And it's going to exhaust you in a certain way because having this different name requires changing everything. You have to now answer to this name or whatever. So anything that requires all of this work because of the impact of the change, I mean, I guess maybe a name is kind of a weird abstract concept of it, but yeah.
One idea that kind of helps me differentiate what is and isn't initiating, what's initiating, what is a response, is just keeping in mind the idea of flows, and that you're kind of, there are flows that you're carried along by a flow, regardless of who you are, but generators especially, because it's like the flow is coming from within them. Nature's tendency is lived out through their aura most directly, and manifestors and projectors are very much here to observe and guide that flow from without. And what a manifestor really has the unique capacity to do is to helpfully break a flow. To break a flow and to start a new flow. That's really what the initiating is. And, because it's like, generators always forget that, like, stopping doing something, quitting, is also initiating, right? That's something you say a lot too.
Yeah.
Because that's breaking a flow. Because if you're still being carried along by the thing and then decide to stop doing it, that's like initiating.
The ultimate,
Generator.
That gets
Then you
nuanced,
can
doesn't it?
stop it. Then you can stop it.
Right.
but the ultimate undefined throat generator thing to do is to just get completely stuck in something where you literally, maybe this is an undefined spleen thing too, because I think that the different channels can interact in different ways to move the energy. But when you really are generator with undefined throat, like myself, it can be so awkward trying to make the next thing happen. It's like we're circling in one little thing, and it's like, okay, I'm trying to get to the next thing. We have to go to this next thing. Eventually it'll just happen because some splenic person will say it's time, or something like that. But I almost think with an undefined spleen, you don't really have a defined sense of the timing. With an undefined throat, you don't have a way to get the attention and direct it towards the next thing. So it's really just the attention is going to stay where it stays. And it's kind of like you get a new piece of art, everyone's paying attention to it, but you want to show them the next piece of art, but you're powerless to do that because you have an undefined throat, so you're not going to change their attention. You just have to kind of stay with it until the attention naturally evaporates.
Right.
Then they're bored with it, and okay, now it's the time for the next thing.
And someone naturally asks, "Oh, what's that over there?"
Yeah,
what's that other
exactly.
thing? Yeah.
But a manifestor can say, "This is just the beginning," and then they
Yeah.
take you to the next thing. And
All right,
so
we're done over here. Come look at that.
yeah, it really is. And you know, projectors are doing a lot with attention as well. I mean, I definitely see the parallel between manifestors and projectors in the two styles of relating to generators, where the manifestor says, this is what we're doing, there's work to be done, here you go. And the projector is really more personal and more connected to what...
I am starving.
Yeah. So,
No, I'm just gonna have my burrito. And
Oh.
can we?
oh, I wasn't sure if you had a question or... Okay, I just...
Sounds like she's gonna have her burrito.
Yeah, that's what I muted. So, okay, but yeah, I mean, definitely the flow thing is one thing that makes sense. That even a manifesting generator, once they're in the flow, they can kind of say, "Hey, do you want to go grab food, or let's do this now?" Or for me, I can never really cleanly do that. It's always a little bit uncomfortable if I try to change that. It's like, okay, now, so, I mean, I have to sometimes. It's like the, well, our hour is up, you know, you kind of have to say that or whatever it is, right? But it's always a little bit awkward, and it feels a little bit like it's interrupting whatever was happening. So, but I guess I also just think about the difference between the day-to-day activities of the generator versus the manifestor. And I mean, I've seen manifestors work incredibly hard. I think it's just that ends justify the means thing, where the manifestor will work like a super generator, but it's for the ends justify the means. And of course, there are unhealthy manifestors out there too who get stuck in the role of having to work too hard. Ra talked about himself being like a super generator when he had this long-term Pluto transit of his root to sacral, and it was kind of making him work too hard. But yeah, I mean, I guess I see that there can be an adrenal burnout from too much root. There can be a sacral burnout where people can just overdo things. But it really seems to me that most of the health issues are actually related to the throat. That the throat is much more common for a generator to get sick overdoing the throat than it is for a manifestor to get sick overdoing the sacral. That's what it seems like to me, because the sacral, regardless of defined or not, is just a much stronger system. The throat is a fragile system. It's the least defense. It's the closest to the surface. It's the weakest in some sense. And it's the double yin, all of the gates having double yin as their foundation. So it's made to have things pass through. I mean, we spread a lot with the throat. So yeah, so anyway, just some kind of, I guess I'll open up the discussion if anyone likes to share, anyone here or remotely, how they distinguish response from action. And something that Ra said, which is that response is only ever response to action. That we might use responding in a general way of just being engaged with the movement of life. But ultimately, being here to respond means here to wait for action and to respond to that action, which is also interesting that projectors aren't here to wait for action. That they're not in the action response dyad, that they're here to be on the scene and use their attention and their awareness to master systems so that they are recognized for their own unique views and their own unique insights into that system. And then they become kind of recognized as masters in that regard. But it's very different to be on the scene and be recognized than to be waiting to respond to some action that happens. So, yeah, kind of an interesting distinction as well.
Well, maybe there's something. I just had another image occur to me. Maybe there's something about if a manifestor can really inaugurate a flow or create a flow, then it's almost as if they make the wind, you know, and every generator is just sort of figuring out where to put their sail up, you know, to be taken by the wind. If the generator is here to flow, and because it's like the wind would be the doing, right, and then you're responding to that doing.
Yeah, one way I think of it is that everything is seeking manifestation. So all sacral energy ultimately wants to have manifestation. Mm-hmm. But when I think of myself as a generator, or I think of Carl Jung, and he famously wrote over 1 million pages, or these, the generator always has a workshop. And it's not that manifestors don't, and you definitely do as a projector. My mom as a reflector has a workshop. So everyone has a workshop. But the generator is really finding the satisfaction through using the workshop, and the reflector is getting something different out of it. They're getting the surprise, so they need a workshop that's conducive to something that allows them to surprise themselves and others with what appears. So it's almost like the manifestation has to be an engagement with nature in some way, with some natural process, because the natural process instigates randomness or chaos or something that makes it surprising and creative. Like, I'm surprised that this chaos could turn sublime, or that this ugly blot could turn beautiful, or something that there's a process. It's basically process art. So the reflector is doing process art. It seems like the projector is really overseeing more than anything. And I mean, they're overseeing, and they have a workshop, but their workshop is what's necessary for their awareness. I almost could imagine the projector, like I used to work at Amazon, and I worked with the retail customer experience team, and there would be these New York business people who would have a subscription to every fashion magazine under the sun, and they would have a stack of magazines like this delivered, and their job was to sit and look through fashion magazines and like master the system of what the fashion is, so they could make intelligent decisions about what direction the company should go in promoting fashion. Wow. Very projector. It's not a workshop of a generator sitting around busting out work, right? They're like, they have to analyze things, they get all their magazines, they have to like understand and kind of put it together and pick their favorite ones and curate and all this stuff, and then determine what direction or where the focus would be, what they're going to focus on for that season and things like that. So it seems like they have a workshop too, but their workshop is more like, I can imagine the ultimate projector workshop being some panopticon of Big Brother cameras where they get to eavesdrop and listen in on everybody, so they could just witness human experience and see how people are struggling. It's like some ultimate like reality show or something of the projector, right? But it's very different. The manifestor workshop, well, that's some kind of Death Star control tower where they can push the buttons to blow up the planets and stuff. And then what would the generator workshop be? That's just the classic, that's kind of the archetype of the workshop, which is that it has the tools necessary so that they can kind of move from one tool to the next, one thing to the next. We had a leather worker, Chris, who taught us all during the HDHD winter respite, and I knew he was a generator before looking at his chart because he had all of his stations, and I'm always making stations. Now you have stations too. I don't want to say generators are the only ones that can have stations, but for the generator, the most frustrating thing is you get to the next phase and you can't do it because you don't have the tool for it. And so you're continually getting blocked by the resistance of not having the tools available. And it's so nice when you have all those tools, you're in the music studio and you can record and then edit and then track and then output, or you're in the art studio, you have all the tools necessary. I mean, it's really something to see. So it seems like the generator's relationship to work and to the workshop is different than that of the manifestor or the other types. I don't know if you have any comments on that. I mean, you have quite a workshop here, and you do a lot of work. I mean, that's why I think we also, maybe here's the next interesting next topic, which is, what did Ra mean when he said projectors aren't here to work? You know, what did he actually mean by that? Like, they obviously have a job to do, and their job is to guide and to help show us where we've been inefficient and to be recognized for their mastery that can bring a lot of efficiency to others and really remove a lot of blocks from others.
Yeah, it does seem like so much of it is about arranging rather than building, just finding, because projectors are always looking for shortcuts. They're always supposed to be work smarter, not harder, kind of when they do work, right? So I guess it's getting everything in its right place is also the projector dream. I sometimes think of that phrase, everything in its right place, as a sort of euphemism for what projector success really feels like. Because the success is not that I spent all my energy in the generator way. It's just everything fell where it was supposed to fall. Doesn't really it's nice that I helped to get it there, but it's just at least that's done. In some way it's the generator signature is I'm done, and the projector signature is more it's done in a way. It's not as simple as that, but there's a sort of, because as a projector being outside the flow and seeing the system, it very much is just and being so about the other too, right? It's the feeling, the reason that it feels it's done is because it's I helped that person get to where they needed to go as a guide or whatever, or
and maybe manifestors too, because the piece that they feel it is of something being done or ended,
right.
As we've talked about. So I guess maybe that is a parallel between the projector, because neither the projector nor the manifestor is here to be available. I think the generator gets into the fantasy of when it will be done,
right.
But the generator is here to be eternally open, and it's never done. The generator's work is never done, and that's okay. I think things do have completion points, I'm done for the day.
Yeah,
or,
nothing's ever.
Or I'm done having sex, or whatever. There can be it's okay, that's finished. You finished. But that is, of course, a great metaphor for the generator, that they're seeking some sort of energy release that can happen when something's finished. But I guess they all have a different relationship to what it means to finish things, where the manifestor is really going for the peace, where they can be at peace because the strife is done, right. The complaints have stopped because it's fixed, or the war has ended, we've come to a truce. Things like that, like the end result is peace.
Right.
The projector is more about successfully navigating something to its correct outcome, I guess, right. You could say. And you're absolutely right. When you think about materially transforming a room, I think of 5432. That's a projector channel. And you recognize somebody who knows what to do to materially improve that situation. The generator doesn't have awareness in their fundamental mechanism of, I guess the only awareness that connects to the generator is through the defense circuit. So the only thing the sacral can possibly be aware of is a potential mate or a potential threat or danger. So it needs to be aware of, this person's cold, my kid is cold, they need a coat, or they're hungry, they need food. But the sacral only has connections to awareness through the two defense channels. So it's different than the projector or the manifestor that can have such a different approach.
So the arranging can be the literal stuff of arranging rooms so it looks nice, or arranging art and recontextualizing it or whatever for creative stuff. But in a way, maybe all the arranging is really just the grand project of arranging, which is just arranging what it is that we have on Earth. And so much of that is arranging people, working with people as a projector, getting them to where they need to be, making sure they have access to the resources and people that they need to have access to. So it's as a projector, it's you have your own system, and that system is self-contained to a degree, but it's also always part of larger systems.
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely seems as we've developed more and more complex systems of business, that there has been this tremendous rise of middle management and managers and corporations where there's groups within groups, and it seems like this is kind of a projector thing. Now, I'm not saying that the projectors are in those roles. Probably a lot of those roles are being held by generators who are frustrated with those roles, because it seems like a projector would have the ability to be in a sort of management position and actually find the success of successfully helping the team gel and work together, and orchestrating, the term Karen Curry Parker uses for the projector. Nice. Whereas a generator in that same position would be really frustrated because their energy isn't being used. I mean, the big secret for the generator is that they're exhausted, but it's not the good exhaustion. It's the frustration. They're saying they're exhausted, but really that's their code word for frustration.
Right.
And what are they frustrated about?
Or exasperated was your other
Yeah, they're really exasperated. And what they're exasperated about is the fact that their energy is not being used. They're not being pushed to their absolute limit. It's like you watch an action show and the action hero is like, oh, he just jumped off a cliff and now he landed on a bus and now all of this is a metaphor. This is like a fantasy. These are like the movies they show dogs of like dogs running in the field. You know, they just show generators, people running around and jumping on things and, you know, just get them really exhausted. You're like, that looks like that feels so good to be that exhausted. Wow, he's really worked out. I mean, I watched this movie the other day called Silent Night. It's a new John Woo film. And the first half of the film is nothing but a guy working out. And it's really satisfying to watch. It's the ultimate generator movie. It's like this dad who's like out of shape and the mobsters, you know, kill someone he's close to and he wants to get revenge. And so it's this whole like generator story of the generator working out until he can.
So training montages are generator.
Training montages are absolutely generator things. Yeah, it's absolutely for the generator. Hi, Lasita. Good to have you. And Hanifa. Yeah, we were.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I thought I'd see whether you were doing it today. I hadn't got an email about it.
Oh, yeah.
I missed last week, so I thought, oh, well, I'll see if it's happening today.
I'm glad you did. And we'll be back on Mondays next week. We will be an hour earlier, and I'll make sure everybody gets the email. Although if they join at the regular time, we'll still be doing it. It's just we've pushed it up an hour in the new year, but it'll be. Yeah, so our topic today, we're kind of talking about the difference in manifestation versus response, and also talking about an interesting topic that came up in the Centers class earlier today when we were talking about the throat, where I found some great quotes from Ra where he's talking about manifestation as something that all types ultimately have to do, that every center seeks the throat, that everything seeks manifestation in some way or another. And that what manifestation is really here to do is to establish and maintain the form principle, the yin. And that manifestation is ultimately yin. And he uses as evidence of this the fact that the 11 gates of the throat are all in the quarter of civilization. And they all have double yin as their bottom diagram. And so it's a really interesting thing. It's like, it's an interesting story that manifestors are here to bring things into the world and the rest of us aren't. But it's even more interesting that we're all here to bring things into the world. Right. Manifestors are simply designed to be that spark or to know how to flick the domino to make the chain reaction. Right. But the rest of us are still doing something in what it is that we're doing. And so we were talking about the idea of having workshops and what's the dream workshop for each type. And Mike was saying as a projector that the projector does love to organize the workshop, that the actual design of the workshop is very fun for the projector because they can increase the success of the people working in the workshop by tweaking it a little bit. And even the people that are working, not only curating the workshop itself, but curating the workers, choosing who gets to work in the workshop or not, and how they work together, and putting them on teams, and this whole...
And helping them find how they'd rather be working, what they'd rather be working on, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Getting them to their stations, that's the everything in its right place thing.
Right, and I was saying as a generator how satisfied I am having the workshop in good shape and having all the tools I need, and kind of what a pleasure it is to really work. It's kind of like, I guess, a violinist playing on a Stradivarius or a piano player playing on a Steinway. Like when you have a really amazing tool, when you have this amazing workshop, then being able to really take off in that. And I think that's true of any type. I mean, there are reflectors like my mom who has her perfect workshop for making her art, or there are projectors like Raphael, who makes incredible, or who we know, who makes these incredible, he makes musical instruments and all sorts of things in his workshop. And so obviously there are going to be masters of all types, but it does seem that there are nuances to the workshop, that the reflector may benefit from a process-oriented workshop, in a way that a generator might not. They might, right, or what is the manifester's workshop like? Kind of a control room, I guess. So just some of the nuances there of what it's like. But yeah, I think we can just open up the discussion if anyone has any of their own approaches to describing the role of the generator in response, the role of the manifester to bring about new things and to kind of initiate, to start off new things, to light the fire. And then what are the roles of the reflector and the projector in this? And how do they manifest? Because we all do in some way. We all bring things into creation. So.
Well, I think the way that everybody has a role is because I'm going to say that, I don't know, I'm speaking for myself, but I would say that most manifestors are actually looking for inspiration. And they're looking at everybody for inspiration. Either it's it inspires something that, oh, I see this is broken, let's fix it. I don't know if this is my 1858 talking, but that's where I think everybody, his role is as important as a manifestor's in making something happen. And even though the manifestor needs to informed, I believe manifestors need to be informed the most. Like the information has to make it to us to want to be able to put it out. So when you were talking about like the projector, the control room watching, actually I would think that would be the manifestors. Because I think we're all watching. We're all watching of, okay, we see this little melee over here, nothing's happening, and what can we do to break that up? How can we change that flow? And you can't do that if you're out on your own mission doing all your own things. You do need the other people, but you need to be informed, like the projectors. I find it's give me so much insight that I would never see, that I would just be blind to. I'd just be bulldozing through until a projector said, hey, over here, we do just the informing. So that's why I think the true peace for a manifestor is when we're being informed, and how can you actually help? How can you use your energy properly? That's the greatest piece of all.
I think of the manifestor piece as when there's peace in the kingdom, and it's a peaceful time. I guess the reason I didn't imagine the manifestor with all of the panopticon situation of looking into people's lives is just that I can't imagine them as being as interested in the people. That I could imagine the manifestor with a control room that has green that turns to red when there's a problem. Right. And everything is green, and they just have this big panel of green, and that's peace. And then suddenly something turns red. Oh, there's a grain shortage. Okay, well... But see, the thing is, but I don't think the manifestor is here to respond to that grain storage. I really think the piece is when you have a generator who's watching this thing, whose job it is to respond in real time.
The manifestor wants to make sure it just never happens.
Well, I think the manifestor is the reason. No, some other manifestor is the reason why there's a grain shortage. You don't understand. The reason that these things are happening is because the manifestors are initiating that's having an impact. And so the action that causes the impact is then what the generator is here to respond to. So really, the peaceful kingdom has a manifestor on top, and then, or at least the old version, the 7-centered peaceful kingdom. I guess the 9-centered peaceful kingdom has a projector on top. And there's all these generators that are there to respond to anything that's happening. Like, oh, it's going to be an especially cold winter. Send out all the generators to build to weave a bunch of blankets for everybody. It's like they all kind of respond en masse with the building. Now, the projector is interesting because they're here to kind of see an ingenious usage of things. Like, hey, we can't make new blankets. Maybe people can actually share. We can have a new social paradigm. People will share a home together, or you will foster somebody or something like that. So, which is not to say that a manifestor wouldn't come up with that too. I guess I'm seeing the role of the manifestor is very much to bring something new into the world. The role of the projector is very much to see what exists in the world and how much inefficiency is going into how it's used. The role of the generator is really to put in the work as the adaptation necessary to respond to actions that change the paradigm. So we have new information, something new has come along, suddenly a bunch of generators need to respond because it's going to take a whole bunch of energy to change everything to adapt to this. Maybe, I mean, even just like, weather, we don't predict. It's a drought. Okay, it takes a whole bunch of generators to now go and fetch waters from somewhere else. Like, the generators are really the response team that are made to be on call. I don't think a manifestor should ever be on call. I don't think projectors really need to be on call either. I think that the role of others is to kind of be outside of the response mechanism. That when something happens, when there's a fire, all the generators run and put out the fire. But nobody else needs to run and put out the fire because they have bigger fish to fry. A good leader isn't going to be putting out every fire themselves personally. They make sure that they have a well-funded fire department of generators to do it.
Yeah.
So, and then the reflector has a classic role of connecting to the common people and then bringing that information back to the manifester. So there is this sort of old paradigm of the reflector being the former middle management, or the one who was kind of the seer, or had their finger on the pulse, had their tendrils, had their tentacles in things. And now I'm not sure if that's the same. I don't know that the reflector has the same mission now, or if their mission is more to kind of be on the periphery of the inner circle and the outer circle of different mutative sects, and to recruit people who are mutative from the homogenized masses, to look out in the field of people who are on the outside and want to be in, and to sample them and go, okay, this one has what it takes. This person could be on the inside. Kind of an interesting role there. Any comments from our virtual attendees? Anyone? No? Okay. Or anyone here? Anyone here have comments? I don't know.
Well, I wrote something, and it looks like there's some other comments too.
Oh, I missed those. Okay, let me take a look. Thank you.
Sirak and Hanifa have comments too.
Great. Well, I'll just start at the top. Yeah, I missed these. So, just a moment here. So Ricky says that she just spent a week with her manifestor mom. She just makes everything better. Sirak says, it seems to him that there's a correlation between how purposeful actions are and signature. So surprise, accidental, satisfaction, stumbling through response, success, guiding through invitation or guidance through invitation, and peace, initiating change. So almost the intentionality of it, that the surprise can be, it's like how fully surrendered you are. Like to be a reflector, you have to be the most surrendered. So you have the accidental surprise, satisfaction, stumbling through response. You have a little bit of intentionality, but it's still navigated step by step. That's an interesting observation. And he's saying this has nothing to do with competence. Yeah, it's not like, it's not like one is going to be more or less. So Lasita says, Randy Richmond, a splenic projector, emphasized that everyone has access to manifestation. Yeah, that's a big point that Ra also makes, is that when he's talking about manifestation, he's really talking about the ultimate output of an interior reality into the exterior. Like there was no road there. I imagined the road. Now I built the road. The road is there. There was no bridge. I built the bridge.
Or even there was no such thing as a bridge in life.
Yeah, I invented it. Yeah, sure.
Well, Randy was a very important teacher, and he's now passed on to the other side, in my opinion. But he had private tuition from Ra. And so I think the story is that he was given a whole bunch of money to go to Egypt. He was an Egyptologist student, and then some reason the project fell through and he had this money and he offered it to Ra, and so he got private tuition.
Wow, I love that. And what a fortuitous turn of events that he didn't go to Egypt, but he ended up learning from Ra anyway. So, yeah. Hanifa says that she thinks that when something manifests in her life, it's been sitting with something through time, and accepting the timing of the transit for how that will show up, not clogging up the space for the correct thing to show up by making premature decisions to fill the space of what you feel is missing. Yeah, this is very important for generators as well, where they're trying to convince you that they're ready for something. I mean, my joke is always like, you have a generator who's single and they want to be in a relationship. There's no room for the other person physically. They only have one nightstand. They don't have any space for the other person. Or they want to be in a band. They don't have the space to actually. They haven't created the space in their life for the things to show up.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely something I've observed again and again. Leaving space and allowing time to surprise you with how that will come through.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I think that there is this way that we can understand manifestation as really just the externalization of something inner, so that if you have an idea for a poem and you write the poem, that you've manifested that poem in some sense. There are other meanings of it as well, but to me, that's an important aspect of this. Ideas don't come from the ajna. They don't only come from the ajna, I should say. We have gate 11, sure, but just like only 3 of the voices of the throat actually are from the mind.
Right.
And if you ask somebody, where do your words come from? Oh, they come from my mind. No, you have words coming from your spleen and from your G center, from other people's G center.
Right.
I mean, you have words coming from all over the place. And it's the same thing here where, right, each of these, ideas that we get don't necessarily come from any one place. I can tell as a generator that I'm responding to something and that I'm engaged with it when it's giving me a lot of ideas. So if I start writing a screenplay and the ideas are just flowing and I have one after the next, that's not telling me that I'm initiating, because if I'm initiating, I'm really trying to bring something new, my thing that I'm trying to bring something new into the world. This isn't necessarily trying to bring something new into the world. This is trying to develop what exists only as a spark and trying to grow it and to build it out. And so I think the spark is what the manifester is really good at. And the elaboration of that is very much actually important to work in response. And I would imagine that even starting a new business, yeah, you have an idea for the business. They're just different kinds of ideas. The manifester has ideas for what the business could be. And I know because I have a manifester ex-boss and friend who has told me for hours what his ideas are for how the business could be. I don't get those kind of ideas. When he starts telling me, I start getting ideas of what we could build and the ideas of how to test out what we've built and ideas for all the work to be done. So I start thinking, okay, we can do these interviews and we can get the feedback from the people. We can present them with this. This is what we can do here. That's what we can do there. And he's telling me more of the vision. His last big idea was to start a candy company in Seattle, but it would be a candy company unlike any other candy company, and he had all the reasons why nobody had ever done a candy company like this. He's not interested in doing a franchise candy company. There are going to be caffeine candies, and they're going to be using, Seattle coffee as part of the thing, and this and that, but he would have all different ones, and so I can just see that. A manifester starts to get ideas of things they could initiate into the world. Well, that's a sign that there's some life force energy there. There's life in it. It's not a dead thing. It's a living thing, that something inside of them has these ideas. I tend to get different kinds of ideas. They're ideas of what I could build out. Now, I'm not saying that all my ideas are generator ideas. I might have ideas for things that have nothing to do with me, and I do have gate 11. So I know that with gate 11, most of the ideas we have, like inventions and businesses and things like that, are really for other people. They're more like, wouldn't it be great if someone wrote a book on, like, that's the kind of idea they are. And eventually I might end up writing the book, but I might not. And maybe it's for somebody else. It's not, it's not a personal thing. But I guess I'm just saying that I think there can be a real misunderstanding in human design of saying, oh, you're a generator, you had an idea for something and you did it, that means you're initiating. Well, okay, taking action, like a generator being like, I was bored, so I decided on a whim to buy tickets to go to this place. Okay, yeah, that's, or they're doing it because they think it's something they should do, or I don't know. There's a lot of ways that a generator can do something where they didn't respond to it first. They just filled the gap. They filled the void.
Right.
because they didn't want there to be a void and they were uncomfortable with the void. So they had to evacuate the void by filling it with as much as possible. It's like the opposite of what we normally think. Normally we think you have to get rid of things and you leave the void. Well, there's too much emptiness. Let's get rid of all the emptiness by filling it with things. And then they end up in a very frustrated place. That definitely happens. But at the same time, you can be sitting there as a generator and you can pick up a pencil and paper because you're in your workshop and these are just tools. And you can start writing a story, and then pretty soon you have another idea, and pretty soon you've written 25 pages. Mm-hmm. And that's not initiating in the same way, even though you are manifesting. You're bringing something new into creation that has never existed before. So,
yeah. Something I'd like to respond to that, but it might be an example of the very thing that is a problem sometimes. Is I feel like I really, really need to say something, but I can't wait until somebody asks me what I think about it. And so I have to say something, and sometimes it just puts people off because I like interject myself when it isn't the appropriate moment. So it's quite a balance to know what is truly a response and what is me initiating it.
And that's also a classic complaint I've heard from projectors or those with projected channels, which I guess, I know you're a generator with this 59.6, and then is that your only channel or do you have one other?
I have 48.16, so I have a projector split.
Yeah, so I wonder if the 48.16 is a part of that as well, because say you just take a 59.6 and they initiate. Well, that can be uncomfortable. It can, because you're going along and it can feel like this fingernails on the chalkboard of, wow, that's a total left turn. Like you're just going along in this very simpatico vibing connection, and then suddenly out of the blue everything kind of turns. And that can feel uncomfortable. But projected channels, those are the ones where it's kind of, oftentimes they'll say something and then they'll be ignored and somebody else will say the exact same thing and get credit, or it's kind of like the whole recognition element as well. And if people are recognizing that you're the one who knows something here, like I think of the projector recognition when someone asks me a question and I think, oh, you got to ask Mike, or you got to ask, there's some projector that I just kind of think of that has work in that area, and I go, oh, but it's also that way with generators and with manifestors. I mean, I do think people have their domains of expertise. I guess it's just that the projector is actually coming to life when somebody recognizes their expertise in a certain area, and when somebody asks them, they like really come to life with this kind of, they're kind of honored, or I don't know, I mean, it's just energized, I guess, by the recognition. We were wondering,
what I wanted to say about my projector split is it has gate 18 on it, 57, and then I have 23. So I can be intuitive about a correction that I need to insist on, but nobody wanted to hear it. And so it can feel really unpopular when it comes out.
Yeah, 23 can be insistent as well. That's part of it, is it can be insistent on knowing. That's one of the keynotes for gate 23 is insist or desist. And when they know something, they really can insist they know something, as we were talking about earlier. And that's a really interesting observation of just that feeling of having something, but it's not recognized or it's not requested. And then as a generator, I know that I've felt my own version of that, which isn't so much that I have something to contribute as much as just I'm ready for the next thing. It's like I'm waiting, and it's like, oh, I wish something would happen. I wish I could leave. I wish I could, like the trapped feeling. I think it's its own sort of, is there any way I can, it's this helplessness, really, the helplessness to change the situation and then trying to change it, but anytime you try, it gets worse. So it's like you're having a party and you're done with the party, But if you kick people out, they will hate you forever, and it'll be like fingernails on the chalkboard. You can't. Like a manifestor can just be like, party's over, and then people just leave. But a generator, they can say party's over all they want, but their energy doesn't say party's over. So they're saying the party's over, leave, but they're like, you're a generator, what are you doing? Like you have this magnetic pull to like keep us here. We're not gonna leave. So what I end up doing is I leave.
Right.
So
That's a good metaphor for their relationship style too, like how you can't kick someone out of your life as a generator, but you can take your train in a different direction.
Yeah, it's an interesting question of are generators just playing manifestor when they block people and things like that. It certainly seems like the generator can only temporarily do that, and then they either just leave it in a point of inertia where it's like, okay, we blocked each other and we don't see each other, so now it's just inertia sets in. Or if they're forced to see each other, it's this continual drain on them of having to kind of continually use the energy to maintain the wall. So yeah, it's an interesting question. But yeah, I just think of generators as fundamentally here for union and fundamentally here to reconcile and to unite, and the role of the manifestor as fundamentally here to separate and to leave.
To divide.
Yeah, and it's necessary. It's necessary to even to make distinctions. I love when James Hillman starts his essay on spirit and soul, and he wants to talk about how in literature these terms are used interchangeably, and he doesn't like that. And he said, so I want to start with the spirit of polymos, which is where we get the term polemic, and of urgent strife and eris, E-R-I-S. And so he invokes polemos, eris, and urgent strife as the three necessary archetypes for division. And that anytime you're talking about how people are not dividing enough and you need to impose division, you need to do it in the spirit of polemos, which is where we get the term polemic. And it's basically an angry sort of diatribe. You have to kind of invoke that a little bit. He was a projector, by the way. He saw a lot. So it'd be interesting to do a reading of Carl Jung and James Hillman as the generator and the projector and how different their approaches were. So Sirach says he feels so excited by recognition. Well, that's why we were wondering. So I know that the birth time and date that you have has generator, but if there's a possibility that it's different, Rachel, she's the one who really commented, like after you gave your reading, you were just positively glowing. And this kind of glowing thing after giving a reading. I'm not usually glowing. I'm usually like, off work, let's go. Yeah. Although you're a projector and you're not always necessarily glowing after reading. I guess sometimes.
I am if I'm recognized during it.
And maybe if it's in person too, maybe more so. Yeah, it's a good question. So Hanifa asks, I guess we're talking about steps. Okay, so Sirach says, to talk about the difference in response and action, what about impulses? Would you call it, like when I'm talking about ideas, he said, wouldn't you call those impulses? Ideas have more steps, whereas an impulse is in itself a single step. I don't see ideas as having more steps. I see an idea as a step, basically, because an idea can be an idea for a word, it can be an idea for a sentence, an idea for a point to make, an idea for an observation to share, an idea for something to say, an idea for a memory. They can also be an idea for a tweet, an idea for a letter, an idea for an essay, an idea for a movie. Oh, wouldn't it be amazing if someone wrote a book like that? That's an idea. It's like an idea can be very vague, but it is for some unit. And the idea is inextricably linked to its medium. So you start to get different ideas when you are on Twitter or when you're sending emails versus texts. You get ideas for things to say in a different way because you have a different medium. So, I mean, whether we call it an impulse or an idea, it's something in you that gives you the perception that there is more development in that direction. Something I could develop here. This could be a song. This could be a melody. This could be a chord progression. This could be a drum pattern. You get ideas for things within the song. Here's an idea for a bass line. Wouldn't it be cool if the bass went like this? Here's an idea for a sound. Wouldn't it be nice if the bass, instead of an electric guitar, was using a tuba or something, right? You can have all sorts of ideas. But they're really just, they're inextricably linked to their medium of expression. And then Hanifa says, is it a single step to feel something over time from different perspectives before you realize something wants to come through? And then holding space for surprise by not having a fixed expectation for what it will be. It feels more like a journey than a step. Yeah, that's absolutely, I think there's many steps to that. And the steps are the times where you think this is it, and then you realize, no, I have to wait longer, and then you think you waited too long, and then you have hope, and then you have despair, and you have all the different parts of the journey. But I think what you're describing, which is that journey of allowing something to come into being, that's a beautiful way to see it. I mean, that's kind of the cosmic corollary to what the solar plexus goes through at a microcosmic level, where the defined solar plexus has to go through its wave. You're not going through a wave, you're going through the world's wave and experiencing it from your particular vantage point and the hanging gates that you have that receive activation from that.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, interesting discussion today. I think a lot of good, hopefully, interesting approaches.
I did want to say to our manifestor there who talked about information, Genoa often talks about how much he needs people to inform him, and that manifestors really need feedback. They need to know what happened from their impact. Like they want to hear how things went rather than just being left in the dark.
That's I really like that, and
They need to be informed as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like a lot of times you're not informed. Like you feel like either people don't think you care, or the aura that you kind of do feel like such an outsider because you're like, please tell me, and they're like, well, we didn't want to bother you, and you're like, but please bother me, you know, because that's and that's why I try to stay really open, because a lot of people are like, I didn't even realize you're a manifestor, and it's because how can I make an impact, how can I use my energy correctly? How do I not be the bull in a china top? How and then all of this involves information.
Yeah. Looping everyone in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. It does seem like manifestors. I mean, if we really take a step back and think, why did you incarnate in this life as a manifestor, not a manifestor previously? Like why would you be a manifestor this time around? And I think it is signing up for a very particular role, which is the role of facilitating change and dealing with the brunt of all of the adjustments that have to happen. And it's a change when you break up with somebody. It's a change when you move places. It's a change when you start a new business and then now the other businesses have to compete. It's a change when you invent something new and that thing puts people out of business. And they're impacted because they no longer do it the old way because progress has come, change has come, and there's no need for the bronze worker anymore because we have steel mills and things like that. So what is it to be the person that's really the bringer of the new and really has a very particular role, which is to start something new and then to not continue it.
Right.
The manifestor fantasy, starting a business, selling it off, profiting from it, somebody else runs it. Somebody else runs the business. You start it, they run it. You bring it into being and then they run with it and you make some money off it because you've done some of the work. But the work you did was the work of birthing it, not the work of raising it. You're not raising it to grow up, you're bringing it into the world. So just how different that is, and looking from the big picture of, okay, obviously you do have a role to fulfill, and that role is about bringing new things into the world. It's very different than a lifetime as an emotional generator with a 59.6, right? Or it's very different to be a projector and so on. So yeah, just kind of realizing that we don't get everyone's life, we get our life. And when you compare to someone else's life, that can really lead to a real malaise, the kind of malaise over, geez, I just want to have a normal life and I don't want to be an outsider anymore. I want to be an insider. Well, you'll get to be an insider again in a different form, in a different incarnation, but somebody has to be the outsider sometimes. And sometimes being that outsider, it doesn't mean you can't have, it doesn't mean that your aura repels everyone. It actually just means you have a different way of connecting with people. With 3536, you're very relational and you connect through sharing experiences with others. I mean, that 3536 is all about sharing feelings with other people, sharing experiences with others, sharing adventures with them, sharing what it is to be human with them. So in some ways, it's deeply, deeply human. It's not like you can't connect, but it is different than being a 59-6, where you're here to be able to bond with anyone, no matter how difficult they are to connect with. You have a 59-6 here, yeah. You can defuse the tension with almost anyone. So, yeah, it's just interesting to see how different the roles are, and kind of gives us hints to what our purpose might be based on type, that we needed to have that type to fulfill it. Not that the type is the purpose, but that Ra couldn't have done his work with human design if he were a projector. It just wouldn't work. He would have relied too much on being invited and recognized. He couldn't. To bring human design into the world, he didn't have the luxury of being recognized and invited. He had to initiate it into the world. And he had to see how to bring it into the world and what actions he could take that would have the biggest impact. And he did. And he was able to take those actions and go on tour at the right time and start different businesses at the right time and delegate responsibilities at the right time, and all of these things that he was able to do that he needed to do to fulfill his purpose. He didn't have the luxury of waiting to be recognized or waiting to respond to something or sampling it or any of that. But then others who are reflectors or who are other types, that they also have a purpose that their type is suited for. It's suited for that purpose. In fact, it's necessary for that purpose. If a reflector is here to see who can mutate and who can't, they can see it in a way that a projector can't. They can see it in a way that no other type can. And so if they're here to bring people into human design, or to bring people into anything, or even just to select people who have that mutative spark, it's like the reflector is really here to rescue the diamonds in the rough, to rescue those great talents that are buried under heaps of mediocrity simply because they were born into a lot in life that doesn't appreciate them. And the reflector is equipped to see them and to pull them into it. Or it's kind of like, why is your, being left angle, being right angle, different profiles, being a 4-1, where your profile is so related to the time. Obviously, there's something about fulfilling that purpose that you needed to be that profile so you could be so in touch with the spirit of that time. Or being right angle, you needed to do it yourself and nobody could help you. Being left angle, you need to work with others. So each of these elements gives us a hint that we have a reason that we are designed this way. And ultimately that reason is because we somehow needed that to do what it is we needed doing.
Right.
And when you see people who have very obviously fulfilled their purpose, like Ra, you can start to imagine Ra with an undefined throat and see how much difficulty he would have had getting it out there, getting anyone's attention, or if he was such a showman and it really helped. His flair for the show was able to get human design out much, much more. Or how would Ra have been with the defined sacral, and so on. All of these different kind of imaginations where you can see, no, actually, he had the perfect design for what he came here to do. That the design is always right, and we can kind of imagine that there's some better design, but then we realize, like Hoja, thinking, how come the walnut tree with its big trunk has tiny little nuts, and the pumpkin vine has giant pumpkins? Shouldn't the walnut tree have the pumpkins? Well, then a walnut falls on his head. That's how we are when we kind of realize the design is actually the best of all possible worlds. There's that thought experiment from Leibniz where he kind of tries to imagine the best of all possible worlds, and this is basically it. because the best of all possible worlds would actually have the ability to not be ideal in certain ways, because that is more ideal than something that's superficially more perfect. So, and then a couple other comments. Yeah, any comments remotely? Lucita?
I have a feeling that Nicola might want to speak because she came on camera. Do you?
Hi, thanks. I had a question, but I'm not really sure if I need to ask it. But since we're here, I will. Johnny, you mentioned earlier around the like buying a ticket as an initiator, like a music ticket, just because you're bored or something. And I would have thought that would have been a response, but I'm just wondering if you can clarify that, because I'm enjoying the conversation, the nuance of the response.
Like you're doing something because you're bored versus is that responding to the board? Is that what you're asking?
Well, it sounded like you were saying that as a different type of response, or perhaps as an initiation for a generator. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on that. Or maybe I heard it wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of coming through in a weird audio, but I mean, I guess.
Oh.
Well, what I would say is that, I mean, if you're a generator and there's nothing going on, and then you try to fill up that space with activity, going like, what should I do? Then that is usually initiating, because the waiting to respond would just be waiting for something to happen.
Right.
And so if it's kind of like, oh, I'm bored. I mean, usually it's not even bored. It's usually like frustrated. I need to evacuate this frustration. I'm going to call my friends and we're going to go out and get drunk. Or something like that, right? That's initiating, because you're like, let me fill up all this space because I can't bear the emptiness, because what do I feel in that emptiness? Frustration.
Right.
But if you've just had the most incredible meal of your life, or the best sex of your life, or the most satisfying building, or you're just like on cloud nine, and then suddenly there's all this empty space, you're luxuriating in the satisfaction of the afterglow of having used your energy. And you feel so good, it doesn't occur to you to try to fill up that space. You're just luxuriating in it. So I guess what I'm saying is, it seems like what ends up happening is the space appears, and the space represents frustration. So the generator initiates in a reactive way. They're not responding to the space, but they are reacting. Oh no, there's nothing to do. I better find something to do. Let me call my friends, or let me get out there and make something happen. So there can be this sort of impulsive, reactive initiating as a reaction to the empty space there. Whereas if they wait and then the satisfying things come, that satisfaction can last for days. There can be this huge afterglow. I mean, let me tell you, after putting on the HDHD conference, when that's done, there's a tremendous afterglow. And people kind of say, oh, are you sad it's over? And it's like, no, I'm luxuriating in the satisfaction of having built something and used all my energy to my maximum. I've been used to my fullest potential. Every capacity that I had dormant has been utilized, and now I've completely exhausted all of my energy, and it feels great. So
I worked.
Yeah, I worked. I worked. And for Mike, it worked. Hey, it worked. They all came here. That's always your joke. Yeah, it worked versus I worked. So, but then I guess as far as like what do we respond to, Ra did say at different times, oh, you're just responding to life, you're responding to the movement of life, and so on. But then at other times said, no, you're really responding to actions. That actions happen, and that life is constantly changing. And so the action happens, and then you have something to respond to. And the action doesn't have to be another person. It could be the roof caved in, and now I have a hole in the roof, and I got to fix the roof. And the rain's getting in. And some action happened that I now have to respond to sort of take care of that. But that's how I see the response, is that it is to something going on, whereas being alone with myself is sort of that existential, it's just me and my spirit. And it's not a generator thing, it's I mean, a manifestor alone to themselves is going to feel their anger if they can't feel the peace. That's what's going to lead them to have to, it's like they try to feel the peace and they can't. They have to go back and do something more because something is eating away at them inside, some unfinished thing that someone else is suffering, someone else is in pain, they have to go save them or something. A projector isn't going to want to be alone if they're only feeling bitterness in their aloneness, but they're going to love that aloneness if they have a spirit of success. So I think this is really just raising the question of how each of us is when we're alone with our own spirit. That's really how I see that. And I don't know if that gets at what you were saying. The audio was a little funny, but we can try again if you have clarifications.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's a wonderful expansion on that choice.
I think we should wrap up.
Yeah, great. Well, we have a couple more questions and then we can wrap up. So Hanifa was saying, are you tying that perception of the world wave for a reflector specifically to the emotional gates, or were you saying all of them? I was saying all of them. I was saying just like the solar plexus wave kind of goes through its process, so too does the whole world go through its process. And right, that wave of the world is what the reflector most acutely feels. And then Hanifa says, is it a single step to feel something? Oh, no. Okay, no, we already got this one. So Sirach replied to that. And so when she was talking about her journey of processing something, Sirach says this got him thinking. He would say it's a step in the same way that finish school is a step. Yeah, to finish something, it's like it's a bigger step. So if you really look at it in the day-to-day, it's not a step, but big picture it is. Yeah, it's kind of how, I mean, like we were talking about with ideas. I can have an idea. It'd be cool to go to college. You know, that's a pretty big one, right? But then once you start developing that idea, it gives you more ideas. And you start to kind of think of what major you might have, what kind of classes you want to take, what specialty. So, okay, well, yeah, and it's not that linear. That's a great point. Hanifa is saying it's not a linear process that's only one thing to the next. Although in some ways it is, because it's not linear, but there is, even non-linear things have linear phases. There's like the beginning, then there's the phase where it gets really complex and non-linear, then there's the phase after the non-linear part where it simplifies, then there's the phase where it reaches completion and so on. So we can always kind of, that's the fun thing about looking at the experiential, is that it can crisscross in all different ways, but it always kind of synthesizes into some synchrony by the end of it. Okay, well, this has been a really fun conversation. Definitely enjoy kind of thinking of these questions and kind of a combination of something so simple but also rich. Any final thoughts? Anything anyone would like to share on the final? You haven't talked much, Rachel. Do you have anything?
I mean,
Yeah.
I think everyone was saying what I was thinking, so.
Okay, you were just...
Well, I mean, it was kind of very just punctuated.
And you're a manifesting generator with 3420. Do you have any comments just on how, I mean, Ra says it's the hardest for them not to just initiate because they have such an incredible power to manifest. I mean, I've seen that power in action where it is kind of this whirlwind of activity, and then the outcome is a radically transformed space or a radically creative meal.
Yeah, well,
or
it was interesting. I had kind of the parallel when you were sharing what happened with you today. I kind of had the same thing coming here to Santa Fe. I showed up for this woman, but I didn't really do anything, but I just kind of like was this help for the moment, in her chaotic process that she was needing guidance for. Like just being there just helped her. It made an impact, in a weird way, but it's like I didn't do anything either.
Yeah, and I have seen the ability for both manifestors and manifesting generators to just take direct action that solves a problem in less time than it would take to talk about how to solve the problem. So I've seen this. I mean, I've seen how there is, I guess maybe the difference being that the manifestor isn't here to be available to respond, whereas the manifesting generator, because you're emotionally defined, not always available. But when you are available, when your emotional wave has taken you to a place of being available, that something happens and you respond immediately and solve it in less time than it would take to describe what happened. I mean, it's like this instantaneous action in a way that I don't. I catalog it and I say, oh, that happened. I notice it. oh, that needs to be fixed. You're like, why are you writing down that needs to be fixed? Just fix it. And I'm like, oh, you mean just take direct action immediately. Okay, like I'm bringing my awareness to the action that needs to happen because I'm open there. So everywhere we're open is kind of where the awareness fills in. I'm like, someone needs to fix that. But you're just doing it in this very kind of immediate way. So yeah, I guess the big difference, both of them can manifest in this incredibly quick way where so much happens that you're kind of like, yesterday and today are like different worlds. They're worlds apart. But the difference is that the manifester is really not here to be available to be on call. And even the emotional and manifesting generator isn't really, because the emotional system takes precedence and makes you unavailable at different periods of time. I've noticed that an unemotional generator like myself is really here to be available. I'm here to be on call. Call me day or night, just speed dial, and I'm just here to kind of answer. But the emotional wave can take you to a place where you have more or less availability in different places in the wave. I've noticed that. Yeah. Well, really good convos. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tyler, for joining us today.
Maybe I'll speak out loud what I just wrote. I heard about an analogy between a manifester and a salamander who, by moving his tail over eons, the river changes direction.
I love that. And that is it'll be a beautiful note to end on. Kind of to what you were saying, Krista, that it's not, we imagine the manifestor is doing some big thing, but actually it's a lot of little things. And yeah, those little things can have a big impact. So thank you for that, Lisita. It's been wonderful having you. And next week we will be Monday, and it'll be an hour earlier. I'll make sure everybody gets the info. But yeah, we'll see you all next week.
Yay!
Thank you all.